Good afternoon, my friends. I'm the Reverend Dr. David William Parry, or thereabouts, and I am privileged to bring yet another episode of Art of Liberty to all those who believe not only in the importance of art, creativity understood generally, but the liberating, enlightening effects that it can have not only as a practitioner, but as a viewer, as a listener, as a reader, and so on. I am overawed and privileged today. Actually, I mean both of those words. To be bringing to our minuscule viewers, who I know are growing. I'm not moaning. I'm not moaning. I know the numbers are growing. Overawed by a friend of mine, a new friend of mine, who was my recent principal doctoral supervisor, and is an author and a poet. That's the bit, of course, that interests me. In his own right, and a very skilled and accomplished author and poet. It is my great pleasure to introduce Professor Kevin Mills, Emeritus of the University of South Wales, who'll be talking with me today about those arts and artifices through which he personally has found a sense of liberation, a sense of freedom, a sense of being more in the world and the world being a better place than it was before that engagement had taken place. Kevin, good afternoon, my friend. How are you?
Afternoon, David. Lovely to be here with you, and really looking forward to our conversations today and hopefully in the future.
Oh, yeah, well, that's Kevin preempting our news at the end of the show. If all goes
Sorry.
well, no, that's perfect. Believe me. If all goes well, I hope Kevin will become my co-host on this highly experimental project as of next month. Remember, it's only monthly at the moment. But it's received enough attention amongst the great and the gay. I hope I'm both. For people for people to say what's going on and why isn't that project evolving? But it is. That's the point. It has been behind the scenes, and it's getting a very, very interested audience, and a very interesting audience. But that's in a minute. Kevin, are there particular books, poems, songs, chants, paintings that have brought a greater sense of liberty to you in your life? What do you think, my friend and fellow Welshman?
Um, well, there's a huge question in a way, and for somebody like who, for me, in many ways, books have been my life, because I've been a teacher of literature for most of my working life. So I've spent the majority of my time really engaging with the literary arts, whether that's the arts of fiction and narrative, um, poetry, drama, but also various kinds of um, non-fiction, even things like critical writing, which to me is a creative art in itself. And I love that kind of interface between literature and criticism and the way in which the critical can be creative and the creative can be critical. And I suppose if we're talking about liberty, I found that incredibly liberating when I discovered that interface between the creative and the critical. Well, as an undergraduate, I was a mature student. I went to university when I was 26. And I didn't know anything about that kind of world, really. I knew a little bit about literary criticism, but not very much. To then encounter writers who were breaking down the barrier between the critical and the literary. That's a relationship which had long been considered parasitic, isn't it? The literary writers or the artists and the critics are parasites on those artists. And to find writers who were breaking down that barrier, I found enormously exciting. People like Derrida, Jeffrey Hartman, Hillis Miller, Julia Kristeva. They were writing in a new way, and I found that really, really exciting. It really turned me on, and why I became a literary critic, I think, is because I was as much a creative writer as I was a critic, really, and still think of myself in a way.
Well, I'm pleased you mentioned Saint Derrida. For those who know me, some of you watching the show regularly do know me quite well. My work with Kevin was originally going to be about Derrida, but as usual, I got overawed. Right? I mean, what can I do? There you are. The man is such a phenomenon. I don't know where I can't put him down. I can't lift him up, but I can't put him down. Kevin, what's your view of the whole Derridian enterprise? I mean, of the writings of Derrida himself, a clear crazy man. The inspiration of the gods is in Derrida. But what do you make of the whole enterprise with the Derridians that came after him? And in your view, are they cutting the mustard? What do you think about that?
I think it's difficult. I'm a bit out of touch with that now, to be honest. I haven't really engaged with Derrida or writing about Derrida very much
Yeah.
in the last decade or so, because my creative work and my critical work just moved in a different direction. Um, when I first encountered Derrida, it was because I was an undergraduate at Cardiff during the kind of the years of the great theory boom, and I was there at that kind of moment where there was great conflict between the continental thinkers and the traditional kind of Anglo-American thinkers, and it became known as the theory wars, didn't it? There was kind of, and it really was very unpleasant at times, actually.
Yeah.
But I was sitting at the feet of Christopher Norris, who was one of the people who brought Derrida to the English-speaking world.
Yeah.
So I learned my Derrida from Christopher Norris initially, and Chris Norris very much saw Derrida as a kind of Enlightenment thinker in many ways, belonging to that kind of Enlightenment tradition, um, but taking that tradition in a slightly new and different direction. Meanwhile, you had the more freewheeling, kind of crazy versions of Derrida, particularly in America, deconstruction on the wild side, Chris Norris used to call it. And I was always more of the kind of Christopher Norris school in a way, but was also just kind of blown away by Derrida himself, particularly when I read White Mythology. Um,
Yeah.
Metaphor in the text of philosophy, and that every time I've read that essay, I've seen something in it I've never seen before. It is such an amazing piece of writing. It's extraordinary, absolutely brilliant. It writes about philosophy in a way that I don't think anybody had ever written about it before. And uh, every time you get to the point where you think, oh yeah, I can see what he's doing here. I can see how he is establishing the importance, the significance of metaphor in philosophy, and then he pulls the rug from under you again, and you think, oh, I thought I had it, but actually there's more to it, and it just keeps rolling on, doesn't it? Every time I read it, it's just it does that to me again. It's just beautiful. I think the ending of it is just gorgeous, just a beautiful metaphor to end it, a kind of almost a meta. What it is, a meta metaphor that ends it,
You
a
know,
metaphor that tries to explain metaphor to you. So yeah, I mean, I haven't, as I say, I haven't really engaged with the Derridean discourse really in years now, but it's still. I would still say it's been an extremely important part of my makeup and the way I think, the way I approach texts, and the way I think about the world, really.
I mean, certainly anything by Derrida has a vampire's kiss. I mean, it never really goes away. Haunts the present and the future thereafter. I mean, for me, I suppose it was his writing on the unbelievably godlike Arto, who no one can pin down at all. I defy anyone to pin that man down. And Derrida got as close as I think anybody can. Very, very, very inspiring, very enlightening in every sense of the word. Anyone that thinks that Arto was simply mad knows nothing about Arto and nothing about literature and nothing about theatre. And nothing about poetry, which is the link there.
Yeah.
You are an accomplished poet, my dear friend. Why did you start writing poetry? If there's anything you can say on that, I mean, lots of poets simply could not respond to that. What do you think your most important contribution to British poetry, global poetry, has been to date? And why would you identify that as opposed to anything else?
God. I start. I think. I mean, I was trying to write poetry when I was a kid. Um, And that started, I think, with going to church. My father was a Baptist minister, so I spent a lot of my childhood in church, listening to sermons, going to Sunday school, listening to the Bible being read, crucially, I think. Um, and my earliest memory of that is my father reading that passage in Ecclesiastes from the pulpit about the wheel being broken at the well. Do you know that one?
Yeah.
And I remember listening to these words and having no idea what they meant, but being absolutely enchanted by them. It's just they seemed kind of magical. Um, and then I remember reading the book of Revelation when I was about 9, and thinking, this is, I have no idea what's going on here, but these images of pale horses and angels with trumpets and all this kind of thing. I was just I just absolutely amazed by it, and it never left me. The other aspect of that of being a kind of growing up in church was hymns, and knowing a lot of hymns and thinking about how they worked and the rhymes and the number of syllables and so on in the line, looking at the structures. So I think that's probably where it comes from, just that kind of love of listening to language, of rhythmic language, musical language. Um, and also my father was a native Welsh speaker, and Welsh was his first language. And the church we belonged to, the services were mostly in English, but my dad did some of it in Welsh, including we used to do the Lord's Prayer in Welsh.
Well,
And I didn't, because I didn't understand it. I wasn't a Welsh speaker, but I was listening to the language and listening to the sounds and the rhythms of it, and again, just kind of enchanted by that, really. So it's just always been there, that kind of sense of language having an emotional effect on you, an emotional impact you can't always necessarily quantify. And I think poetry comes out of that in a way, that kind of sense of language as magic.
mm,
It just
mm.
uh, it just does things to you, and you don't exactly know why. And takes you to places that you didn't know you were going. Um,
I think that's a beautiful response. I mean, I can't claim a direct Welsh lineage. I mean, in my case, there are Welshies in the in the background somewhere. But I know I've always been very, very proud of that aspect of me. And I suppose being an old Catholic, I mean, it frees me up from sort of the dedicated, overly dedicated, you will be at a church at this particular time and deliver a sermon on this particular date. We do have all that, of course, but with us, or at least with my interpretation of that, it's much more laissez-faire, because we're encouraging people into the mysteries of the soul, mysteries of the self, and their own gifts. I mean, gifts is a very
yeah.
important concept in old Catholicism. You are a very gifted man. Would you identify a particular poem of your own that stands out amongst the others? In the sense that it's been more successful than maybe other things with the machinery behind it. It expressed
Yeah,
what you wanted
yeah.
to express. Is there a particular poem or collection that you draw listeners' attention to?
Um, in terms of other people engaging with my work, I think probably the most successful poems I've published have been the ones that I wrote. They're close to being dialect poems, but they're not quite dialect in my first collection. And Fool. And I wrote, I think it was 3 poems that were uh, I call them accent poems rather than dialect poems, because they were based on the way people in the valleys speak where I grew up. So it's trying to take the rhythms, the sounds of the language of the valleys, and um, to use them to reflect on various things, including a painting by Kevin Sinnott,
Mm.
which was in the National Museum in Cardiff, called "Running Away with the Hairdresser." And so the poems started off as, because that painting, "Running Away with the Hairdresser," which is a marvelous painting, is a painting of a street in a Valleys town, very, very familiar. As soon as I saw it, I thought, God, I know where that is. Um, and to kind of spark that idea of trying to communicate something of that vision of the valleys through the verse.
Well, that leads
In ter-
me. I'll jump in there because it leads me perfectly to your work with contemporary ancient theatre. I think, which is a project much more people must get to know about. More people need to know about. This is the
but
theatre side of David coming out. Kevin is involved with his brother, Vic Mills, in one of the most exciting theatrical projects I've actually come across in years.
I'm
Kevin,
a big
tell us
fan.
what it is. If a theatre isn't something to do with a local community, a geographical area, then I don't know what it is. I mean, obviously there are universal pieces
Of
of
course.
theatre. I mean,
Yeah.
but that how realistic and how rare is that? I mean, most of the universal pieces simply aren't. They're not speaking to anybody in any way. Your work with Vic speaks directly to a given locality.
Mm.
What got you involved in contemporary ancient theatre, and how have you contributed to it to date?
It started because um, I was reading about a Welsh saint, Cadwch. He's known as in English Catwg in Welsh, and I came across a hagiography from the early Norman period, and was reading about these stories about this extraordinary character, who's a bit like Merlin. He's a kind of magical sort of figure, and he's more like Merlin than he is than Saint David, really, in a way. He's a terrifying man whose enemies get burnt by fire from heaven and stuff. But I was reading these stories, and they were amazing. They're really interesting stories, and some of the earliest stories about King Arthur included in this hagiography. So when I came across them and I was reading, I thought, oh, these are great stories. More people should know about these stories. So my first instinct was to do a series of poems. So I wrote a sequence of poems, which was subsequently published as a kind of a 15-page pamphlet. But of course, nobody buys poetry. Nobody reads poetry. So at the end of it, I thought, that's not going to make these stories better known in the long run. So I went to Vic, because my brother Vic has been a playwright and director for donkey's years. And so I said to Vic, the really interesting stories. Do you think you can do anything theatrical with this? So he said, "Well, I'll have a look." And he picked on one story, a story about two boys who get drowned in off the South Wales coast, and turned that into a drama. And in order to put that drama on, we put together a little company. Just got a few local actors, got funding from the church in Wales,
Wow.
um, and managed to, put it on a professional basis. We paid the actors and so on. And we set up Contemporary Ancient Theatre just to run that project initially. But it went very well. And bit by bit, we got more people involved. We put on another production. We got a filmmaker involved. We got a musician involved. And now it is a community interest company. And we try to put on productions which are kind of multimedia, really. So we have film and music, and we focus on Welsh history. So we try to take aspects of, well, particularly from this part of the world, from this part of Wales, southeast Wales, and try to make those ancient stories contemporary, hence contemporary ancient. The idea of kind of bringing history to life. And our motto is heb hanes, heb hunaniaeth, which means without history, without identity.
Wow.
And that's what we try to focus on, is the importance to contemporary identity of the past, and a better understanding and a better knowledge of the past, I suppose.
You were involved with the production for The Love of Merthyr, I
That's
believe.
right.
Could you
Yeah,
tell us a
yeah.
bit about that?
For the Love of Merthyr, that came about because we wanted to do something to mark the NHS anniversary,
Yeah.
um, and following COVID,
Yeah.
celebrating the NHS and its role in our country and in our culture.
Yeah.
So we didn't want to do the kind of Nye Bevan story because it had already been done. There's a big production Nye. So we thought um, one of the directors who works with us, Neil Maidman, is a Merthyr boy. So we thought, well, that would be interesting because the year the NHS was launched, 1948, was also the year that Hoover opened this new futuristic factory in Merthyr, which transformed the town. So we thought we'd do that play focused on that moment, 1948, of what happened with the coming of Hoover to Merthyr, along with the establishing of the NHS and there'd been a great history of medical care in Merthyr as well. There was already a hospital in Merthyr,
Mhm.
so it seemed like an ideal kind of combination of things.
Mhm.
So yeah, then we did a number of things. I wrote a poem about the history of Merthyr, which was then filmed, and various famous sons and daughters of Merthyr contributed to the reading of that film, which was put online. Still there, I think. It's called Ironworks. And then I wrote um, song lyrics for our composer, which were then, and they were, we aimed between us to put together some songs which was very suggestive of the 1940s, of that period. So tried to write in that kind of vein, tried to write lyrics which were kind of 40s style in a way. Yeah, so it ended up being a kind of multimedia production, and was performed in Merthyr and is about to go to Canada. I've been going to
Oh,
Canada.
wow. Congratulations. Congratulations. Well, I mean, you're certainly proving to our listeners, our viewers, that you're something of a Renaissance man. I mean, we've touched upon literature, lit crit, we've touched upon painting, we've touched upon music, we've touched upon theatre, we've even touched on radical philosophy. Yes, I'm sorry, Derrida comes back in again. What can I do? But I want to drag us back to scripture. I suppose it's an occupational hazard of mine,
No, no, I think,
particularly because we share a fascination, horrified and otherwise, of the book of Ecclesiastes. This unique global document about the sufferings of the human condition. I mean,
yeah.
I'd like you, if you wouldn't mind, Kevin, to talk a little about that and your reactions to that book as a scholar and as a poet.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, to be honest, I mean, I haven't spent much time thinking about the book of Ecclesiastes as I have about some other parts of the Bible. But,
Well,
um,
the
I,
floor is
I, I,
yours. I mean, tell us, the floor is yours.
I did. It was one of the first books of the Bible that I think I responded to, Ecclesiastes, because it seemed slightly out of step with the gospel in some ways, and the teaching of Christ seemed a long way from Ecclesiastes, and certainly the teaching of Paul seems a long way from Ecclesiastes. So it always struck me as being an interesting text. So I did read it quite a lot when I was a teenager. Because it's good for teenage angst, isn't it? The Book of Ecclesiastes, vanity, vanity, all is vanity. That's the kind of summed up my teenage years, I guess. So, um, uh, then I think after that it was the Book of Job. That
Mm.
I really got gripped by the Book of Job, because that seemed even further away from Christianity. The Book of Job. What what's going on here? This God is this is a crazy God, isn't it? But I've never got away from it. I've never.
Mm.
I mean, I'm not. I don't think of myself as being a believer in any sense anymore. I think of myself as being agnostic about just about everything. um, but I've never got away from the Bible. I keep going back to it. And I still do. I still read it. I still read the Psalms. I still read the Book of Job.
Mhm.
I haven't read Revelation for a long time because I'm too scared. But it seems too real.
Well, I mean, certainly, no one should think biblical literature is limited to believers. I mean, it's this
Oh, absolutely. No.
unique cultural treasure.
Yeah. Yeah.
One of the founding documents of Western civilization,
Yeah.
no matter what one thinks of Western civilization.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a treasure trove of poetry and poets and historians.
Yeah.
I've always
Yeah.
found it lacking on philosophy, but it's woven into certain places. I mean, certainly there are links between Hebrew scriptures and the religions, the non-Semitic religions of the Middle East. I mean,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
obviously, this is leading towards another shared obsession of ours, Gilgamesh. You've written about Gilgamesh. I get the impression you've thought a lot about Gilgamesh. But you know
Yeah.
what drew you to that story, and what do you think it's trying to tell us?
Um, it's interesting. I first came across it when I was a teenager because I had a teacher at school who was something of an academic, I suppose, looking back. And he taught me scripture. I did scripture with him at O level and A level.
Hmm.
And so he used to throw in, the odd allusion to the Book of Gilgamesh, and I didn't know anything about it. And then many, many years later, when I was in my autodidact phase after I left school, before I went to university, um, I came across the old N.K. Sanders version of it in the Penguin Classics. I found it in a charity shop. And I thought, oh, Gilgamesh, I remember the name Gilgamesh. So I bought it and read it. And I just thought, this is fantastic. What an amazing story. And I never forgot it. And then years later, I was putting together a module when I was in the University of Portsmouth. I was putting together a module. I wanted a module that would get students thinking about, particularly about the Bible, I suppose, because the Bible is crucial to English literature,
Yeah, yeah.
So I thought, well, I'll put together a course on mythology. I'll do some Greek stuff and do some Bible stuff, and I just thought, well, if I'm doing that, I'll do Gilgamesh. So I started doing classes on Gilgamesh and never stopped. And
Hmm.
I carried on teaching Gilgamesh right up until last year when I retired. Um, because I can't put it down. It's just the most amazing
Mhm.
story. And I suppose it will always connect with us because it's about the fear of death, isn't it? And that point of at which we all come to, where we think to ourselves, "Oh, I'm going to die." Yeah? Death isn't just something that happens to other people; it's going to happen to me. And there's that moment, isn't there, when Gilgamesh realizes after the death of Enkidu, and he thinks, "Oh my God, I'm mortal as well." And um, so it's such a recognizable thing, isn't it? It's so fundamental to human experience, isn't it? That the heart of everything we are is the fact that we're going to die. Um, and I love that, but I also love the fact that um, the more you look at the Epic of Gilgamesh, what just seems like a kind of simple tale is actually a brilliant piece of narrative engineering. It's so brilliantly put together, and these things which weave through these different episodes, and leading you to that kind of moment where Gilgamesh has to accept his own mortality at the end. He's confronted by the fact that he is not going to gain immortality, and it's just not possible for him. So it's brilliant. It's a wonderful, um, and despite the fact that it's about mortality, it's also extremely uplifting in a way, because Gilgamesh at the end of it is a wiser person. At the beginning of it, he's a tyrant and a despot and a cruel ruler. At the end of it, he comes back and he thinks, the city's more important than I am. This isn't about me. This is about the city. This is about all of us together
Yeah.
and how we best survive. So it's very, it's kind of life enhancing in the long run, I think.
Gosh, you reminded me of something by Charles Bukowski, a man I truly admire, who I can't remember the actual quote, but it was something along the lines that the fact we're all going to die should make us more loving to each other, and it just doesn't.
Yeah,
A similar insight by a great genius, of course.
yeah, yeah,
Gosh, Kevin, we've touched upon so many. I mean, the point of this show at the moment is to show range. We don't go into depth as it's structured at the moment, but certainly I think we've raised a number of issues at great depth. What are you working on at the moment? I still can't believe USW let you go, but that's me, I suppose. I still can't. USW, you know I love you, but I can't believe you let Kevin go. There we are. Are you working? on any project at the minute, either theatrical or another poem or?
Yeah, a few things going on. We're working on our next production, a theatre working on our next production,
Mm,
which is a play by our musician, um, uh, uh, Steve Preston,
mhm,
and I'm writing a series of poems for the drama that will, pepper the script. I've got one poem left to write for that, um, and that's set at the end of the First World War.
mm,
So what I'm trying to do with that is, like I did with the 40s, really, is try and get myself into that
yeah.
space, the headspace of the First World War writers. So I've been reading a lot of First World War poetry again. Um, that's quite interesting. Um, then I've got an idea for a play myself,
Mm.
which I haven't fully formulated yet, but based on, do you know the story of Cantre'r Gwaelod?
Oh my heavens, yes. Yes, 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 yes. Hmm.
This is the lost land under
Yeah,
Cardigan Bay.
yeah, yeah.
And there's an ancient poem from the Black Book of Carmarthen, which is the earliest reference, I think, to Cantre'r Gwaelod. Um, and it seemed to me to be a story which kind of chimes with
Mhm.
environmental disaster and
Mm,
the
mm,
kind of threat that we are currently facing, particularly, because every year and parts of the UK end up underwater, so it seems to me to be a story worth thinking about.
mhm.
And I've had a couple of ideas about a play based on that, but I haven't got very far with it yet. I'm still scratching my head over it.
Well, you've got me obviously intrigued. I'm intrigued with your work anyway, but you've got me even more intrigued at the minute. Yeah, gosh, World War One poets. I confess, yeah, Sean Gabb, if you're listening to this, yes, I confess to being absolutely obsessed with Robert Graves. I'm sorry. Yeah, it's not just a curse; it's a blessing as well. I can't stand his poetry. Apart from the one about the White Goddess, which I thought in a weird sort of way was very successful. Love the historical novels. I mean, A God at Colchester and all the rest of it. I thought, what was it, Siegfried Sassoon? I'm trying to remember the names from that particular period. I mean, it's all so depressing. I mean, how do you manage to cope with World War One poetry and write something uplifting?
Uh, it's been interesting. I think the play, Steve's play is an uplifting one.
Right.
It has some very, life affirming aspects to it. It's particularly very pro immigration, and
Yep.
also one of the things we've tried to address is, attitudes to immigrants, as
Yeah.
a massively important topic. Um, so we try to, it's not all doom and gloom, but far from it, and I don't think the poetry of the First World War is either.
Yeah.
Actually, there's a
Right.
lot of very um, kind of uplifting stuff that comes out of the First World War. Um, One of the things that is the way in which society, all too briefly, really, um, comes to depend and to recognize its dependence on women.
Yeah.
And they, hard as the patriarchy tried to stuff women back in the bottle after the war, it never succeeded.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the First World War was, in some ways, it did that good thing of, uncorking women's potential to some extent.
Yeah.
And there's some positive stuff about that, I think, in the First World War, in the writings of the period, that I quite like. So we try to, pick on those kind of things as well as the slaughter.
Oh, I mean, I know it's not universally doom and gloom, but there was just so much of it. I never really managed to resonate with World War One poetry, although I did World War One poets. Brave young people dealing with the existential directly, and they didn't bow their chins. They just got up and got on with it. I mean,
Yeah,
absolutely
yeah,
astonishing.
yeah,
For
yeah,
those,
yeah, yeah.
I never really, I'm trying to avoid politics at the minute. All I'll say about immigrants is in a country like this, it's a bit rich that we have a problem with immigrants. And also when one of these Muslim refugees turned up, I mean, I decided to have a civil partnership with him. So, I mean, it's not all uniformly awful. I mean, great blessings are there as well. If we want to look for them, if we don't,
Yeah,
nothing
absolutely.
will convince you otherwise. But if you do, my heavens, I mean, those particular choices changed my life hugely for the better,
Yeah,
immeasurably so.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Kevin, is there one way you want to round off with recommendations? What do you recommend to readers, art lovers to go and explore and expand their minds? Is there anything in particular you want to draw their attention to?
Also an interesting question. Um, Difficult to put your finger on, isn't it? It's like desert island discs, you know. What record are you going to save? um, I think it's always worth reading Derrida. I think he's, difficult as he is, he's always worth reading.
Yeah.
Um, I think that there are, for me, at the moment, I think music has become more important than it's ever been. It's always been important to me, but I listen to more music because I'm retired. I can listen to music now in a way that I couldn't always. And I've gone back to the great singer-songwriters. And the one who I recommend looking up, a singer-songwriter, not very well known, is called Judy Sill. And I don't know if you remember Judy Sill. She was
It rings a
had
bell.
an ultra briefer career,
Hmm.
died tragically young. But her music, she had a wonderfully kind of musical imagination and wacky.
Hmm.
Lyrically, her lyrics are very odd at times. But the more you listen to them, the more you find in them this kind of um, sanity and a kind of a way of looking at the world which is mystical,
Hmm.
but also rooted in reality, rooted
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
real experience.
Yeah.
So if you've never heard of Judy Sill, I would recommend you look it up. And there's some good stuff on YouTube of her appearances on Old Grey Whistle Test. Um,
A legend in its own right, of course.
yeah, yeah,
Friends, we'll round off there because we're recording this on a Sunday afternoon, on a bank holiday Sunday afternoon. So I'm sure my dear friend Professor Mills has other things, if not better things, because this is a good enterprise, to be doing. As I say, if Kevin is willing, both of us will be co-presenting this experimental project from next month. For the time being, it will remain once a month. It will remain at 30 minutes, but we'll be doing things slightly differently from next month. And I hope you'll join us again to discover the secrets hidden in the art of liberty. God bless you all.